Hello there. I am so sorry I was late. I went to an opening of a friend who joins us sometimes on Fireside Reading. Her name is Hunter, and her handle is Little Horse on the Prairie, and she was opening an incredible line of new products about her for kids. She has two animals called Fable and Whisper, and it's all related to them. So I'm sorry it took me an age to get here from where it was opening in Beverly Hills. But please check it out, Little Horse on the Prairie on Instagram. Beautiful stuff. My name's Gildart, and this is Fireside Reading. And thank you. I saw Sean and Sharon before I sat down, and I hope others are there. I'm sorry if I inconvenienced anybody. Usually I'm pretty good at being on time, but not today. And after a little absence, because I've been shooting this NCIS LA episode this last week. So sorry we haven't had much a passage to India, but I will resume today. And I hope everyone's doing very well. It was great fun to shoot NCIS LA. It was directed by one of the stars of the show. Her name is Dani, or Daniela Rua, I think is how you pronounce her name, Ruah. She was just adorable. The whole thing was great fun. I played a Frenchman, and I'll let everyone know when it's on so that we can all hopefully watch it and enjoy it. But it was great fun to do. Meanwhile, Fireside Reading is my gift to you every day at 5 Pacific at Fireside Reading on Instagram. Everything uploaded to the YouTube channel Fireside Reading. I'm trying to catch up with the uploads. I've now resolved the computer issues I was having, and I'm able to upload stuff. We've been doing it since the lockdown started, and we are able to put up all these books that we've read together. Like audiobooks, only a little bit more because I'm sitting here and reading to you in front of the fire, hence Fireside Reading. And the latest book we're doing is a passage to India, and I'm thoroughly enjoying this. And let us continue. Welcome to a Fireside Reading of A Passage to India by E.M. Forster, Chapter 21. Dismissing his regrets as inappropriate to the matter in hand, he accomplished the last section of the day by riding off to his new allies. He was glad that he had broken with the club, for he would have picked up scraps of gossip there and reported them down in the city, and he was glad to be denied this opportunity. He would miss his billiards and occasional tennis and cracks with McBride, but really that was all, so light did he travel. At the entrance of the bazaars, a tiger made his horse shy. A youth dressed up as a tiger, the body striped brown and yellow, a mask over the face. Mohuram was working up. The city beat a good many drums, but seemed good-tempered. He was invited to inspect a small tazia, a flimsy and frivolous erection, more like a crinoline than the tomb of the grandson of the prophet, done to death at Kerbela. Excited children were pasting colored paper over its ribs. The rest of the evening he spent with the Nawab Bahadur, Hamidullah, Mahmud Ali, and others of the Confederacy. The campaign was also working up. A telegram had been sent to the famous Amrit Rao, and his acceptance received. Application for bail was to be renewed. It could not well be withheld now that Miss Quested was out of danger. The conference was serious and sensible, but marred by a group of itinerant musicians who were allowed to play in the compound. Each held a large earthenware jar containing pebbles and jerked it up and down in time to a doleful chant. Distracted by the noise, he suggested their dismissal, but the Nawab Bahadur vetoed it. He said that musicians who had walked many miles might bring good luck. Late at night, he had an inclination to tell Professor Godbole of the tactical and moral error he had made in being rude to Heslop, and to hear what he would say. But the old fellow had gone to bed and slipped off unmolested to his new job in a day or two. He always did possess the knack of slipping off. Chapter 22. Adela lay for several days in the McBride's bungalow. She had been touched by the sun. Also, hundreds of cactus spines had to be picked out of her flesh. Hour after hour, Miss Derrick and Miss McBride examined her through magnifying glasses, always coming on fresh colonies, tiny hairs that might snap off and be drawn into the blood if they were neglected. She lay passive beneath their fingers, which developed the shock that had begun in the cave. Hitherto she had not much minded whether she was touched or not. Her senses were abnormally inert, and the only contact she anticipated was that of mind. Everything now was transferred to the surface of her body, which began to avenge itself and feed unhealthily. People seemed very much alike, except that some would come close while others kept away. "In space things touch, in time things part," she repeated to herself while the thorns were being extracted, her brain so weak that she could not decide whether the phrase was a philosophy or a pun. They were kind to her, indeed over-kind, the men too respectful, the women too sympathetic, whereas Mrs. Moore, the only visitor she wanted, kept away. No one understood her trouble or knew why she vibrated between hard common sense and hysteria. She would begin a speech as if nothing particular had happened. "I went into this detestable cave," she would say dryly, "and I remember scratching the wall with my fingernail to start the usual echo. And then, as I was saying, there was this shadow, or sort of shadow, down the entrance tunnel, bottling me up. It seemed like an age, but I suppose the whole thing can't have lasted 30 seconds, really. I hit at him with the glasses. He pulled me round the cave by the strap. It broke. I escaped. That's all. He never actually touched me once. It all seems such nonsense." Then her eyes would fill with tears. "Naturally I'm upset, but I shall get over it." And then she would break down entirely, and the women would feel she was one of themselves and cry too, and men in the next room murmur, "Good God! Good God!" No one realized that she thought tears vile, a degradation more subtle than anything endured in the Marabar, a negation of her advanced outlook and the natural honesty of her mind. Adela was always trying to think the incident out, always reminding herself that no harm had been done. There was the shock, but what is that? For a time, her own logic would convince her. Then she would hear the echo again, weep, declare she was unworthy of Ronnie, and hope her assailant would get the maximum penalty. After one of these bouts, she longed to go out into the bazaars and ask pardon from everyone she met, for she felt in some vague way that she was leaving the world worse than she found it. She felt that it was her crime, until the intellect, reawakening, pointed out to her that she was inaccurate here and set her again upon her sterile round. If only she could have seen Mrs. Moore. The old lady had not been well either, and was disinclined to come out, Ronnie reported, and consequently the echo flourished raging up and down like a nerve in the faculty of her hearing, and the noise in the cave, so unimportant intellectually, was prolonged over the surface of her life. She had struck the polished wall for no reason, and before the comment had died away, he followed her, and the climax was the falling of her field glasses. The sound had spouted after her when she escaped, and was going on still, like a river that gradually floods the plain. Only Mrs. Moore could drive it back to its source and seal the broken reservoir. Evil was loose. She could even hear it entering the lives of others. And Adela spent days in this atmosphere of grief and depression. Her friends kept up their spirits by demanding holocausts of natives, but she was too worried and weak to do that. When the cactus thorns had all been extracted and her temperature fallen to normal, Ronnie came to fetch her away. He was worn with indignation and suffering, and she wished she could comfort him, but intimacy seemed to caricature itself, and the more they spoke, the more wretched and self-conscious they became. Practical talk was the least painful, and he and McBride told her now one or two things which they had concealed from her during the crisis by the doctor's orders. She learnt for the first time of the Muhurrum troubles. There had nearly been a riot. The last day of the festival, the great procession left its official route and tried to enter the civil station, and a telephone had been cut because it interrupted the advance of one of the large paper towers. McBride and his police had pulled the thing straight, a fine piece of work. They passed on to another and very painful subject, the trial. She would have to appear in court, identify the prisoner, and submit to cross-examination by an Indian lawyer.
"Can Mrs. Moore be with me?"
was all she said.
"Certainly, and I shall be there myself," Ronnie replied. "The case won't come before me. They've objected to me on personal grounds. It will be at Chandrapur. We thought at one time it would be transferred elsewhere."
"Miss Quested realizes what all that means, though," said McBride sadly. "The case will come before Das." Das was Ronnie's assistant, own brother to the Mrs. Bhattacharya whose carriage had played them false last month. He was courteous and intelligent, and with the evidence before him could only come to one conclusion, but that he should be judge over an English girl had convulsed the station with wrath, and some of the women had sent a telegram about it to Lady Mellanby, the wife of the Lieutenant Governor.
"I must come before someone."
That's the way to face it. You have pluck, Miss Quested." He grew very bitter over the arrangements and called them the fruits of democracy. In the old days, an English woman would not have had to appear, nor would any Indian have dared to discuss her private affairs. She would have made her deposition, and judgment would have followed. He apologized to her for the condition of the country, with the result that she gave one of her sudden little shoots of tears. Ronnie wandered miserably about the room while she cried, treading upon the flowers of the cashmere carpet that so inevitably covered it, or drumming on the brass Benares bowls.
"I do this less every day. I shall soon be quite well," she said, blowing her nose and feeling hideous. "What I need is something to do. That is why I keep on with this ridiculous crying."
"It's not ridiculous. We think you wonderful," said the policeman very sincerely. "It only bothers us that we can't help you more. Your stopping here at such a time is the greatest honor this house? He too was overcome with emotion. By the way, a letter came here for you while you were ill, he continued. I opened it, which is a strange confession to make. Will you forgive me? The circumstances are peculiar. It is from Fielding.
Why should he write to me?
A most lamentable thing has happened. The defense got hold of him. He's a crank, said Ronnie lightly. That's your way of putting it, but a man can be a crank without being a cad. Miss Quested had better know how he behaved to you. If you don't tell her, somebody else will. He told her. He is now the mainstay of the defense, I needn't add. He is the one righteous Englishman in a horde of tyrants. He receives deputations from the bazaars, and they all chew betel nut and smear one another's hands with scent. It is not easy to enter into the mind of such a man. His students are on strike. Out of enthusiasm for him, they won't learn their lessons. If it weren't for Fielding, one would never have had the Mohorram trouble. He has done a very grave disservice to the whole community. The letter lay here a day or two, waiting till you were well enough. Then the situation got so grave that I decided to open it in case it was useful to us.
Is it?
She said feebly. Not at all. He only has the impertinence to suggest you have made a mistake.
Would that I had.
She glanced through the letter, which was careful and formal in its wording. Dr. Aziz is innocent, she read. Then her voice began to tremble again.
But think of his behaviour to you, Ronnie, when you had already to bear so much for my sake. It was shocking of him. My dear, how can I repay you? How can one repay when one has nothing to give? What is the use of personal relationships when everyone brings less and less to them? I feel we ought all to go back into the desert for centuries and try and get good. I want to begin at the beginning. All the things I thought I'd learned are just a hindrance. They're not knowledge at all. I'm not fit for personal relationships. Well, let's go. Of course, Mr. Fielding's letter doesn't count. He can think and write what he likes, only he shouldn't have been rude to you when you had so much to bear. That's what matters. I don't want your arm. I'm a magnificent walker, so don't touch me, please.
Mrs. McBride wished her an affectionate goodbye, a woman with whom she had nothing in common and whose intimacy oppressed her. They would have to meet now year after year until one of their husbands was superannuated. Truly, Anglo-India had caught her with a vengeance, and perhaps it served her right for having tried to take up a line of her own. Humbled, yet repelled, she gave thanks.
Oh, we must help one another. We must take the rough with the smooth,
said Mrs. McBride. Miss Derrick was there too, still making jokes about her comic Maharaja and Ronnie. Required as a witness at the trial, she had refused to send back the Mudkul car. They would be frightfully sick. Both Mrs. McBride and Miss Derrick kissed her and called her by her Christian name. Then Ronnie drove her back. It was early in the morning, for the day, as the hot weather advanced, swelled like a monster at both ends, and left less and less room for the movement of mortals. As they neared his bungalow, he said, "Mother's looking forward to seeing you, but of course she's old. One mustn't forget that. Old people never take things as one expects, in my opinion." He seemed warning her against approaching disappointment, but she took no notice. Her friendship with Mrs. Moore was so deep and real that she felt sure it would last, whatever else happened.
What can I do to make things easier for you? It's you who matter, she sighed.
Dear old girl to say so.
Dear old boy.
Then she cried,
Ronnie, she isn't ill too.
He reassured her Major Calendar was not dissatisfied. But you'll find her irritable. We are an irritable family. Well, you'll see for yourself. No doubt my own nerves are out of order, and I expected more from Mother when I came in from the office than she felt able to give. She is sure to make a special effort for you. Still, I don't want your homecoming to be a disappointing one. Don't expect too much. And we will find out what happens in part 2 of chapter 22 tomorrow. Again, sorry I was late today. We'll read tomorrow, and thereafter I think things are good for a while. So I will see you all tomorrow at 5 Pacific, live at Fireside Reading on Instagram. Until then, everyone, please stay very, very well. Good night.